So there has been a lockdown for about 3 months, and I don't particularly like it, of course. And even though I don't like it, um, it was never a shock to me because I've actually been in lockdown for over 10 years, over a decade. And I'll tell you the story about how that happened. I am an entertainer. I'm a juggler. People know me more for doing a memory act. I have a Guinness World Record for memorizing zip codes, and I do a show based on that. I'm known as the Zip Code Man, and I perform where I live in Boulder, Colorado, on the Pearl Street Mall, which is an outdoor mall, and I've performed in many venues all over the world. And so I do lots of shows on Pearl Street on this outdoor mall. I've been doing it since the early 1990s. And when I would go to the mall, I would see these very disturbed looking people. For example, this one guy who looked sort of like a Hell's Angel, a biker guy. He had this long hair, a beard, tattoos on his chest, would wear jewelry, a leather jacket, like a real badass looking guy. And he would walk up and down the mall, and I never had a problem with him, except maybe he would come into my show and while I'm doing a show, he would yell at me, but it was never that big a deal. It was just he was one of these disturbed people, I would say. Another disturbed looking guy was this short guy with long hair who always smelled of alcohol. And he was a combination between an alcoholic and a guy from a mental hospital. And I didn't know whether he came from alcohol rehab or a mental hospital. It was, and he would act really crazy. Another disturbed looking guy was a fat guy, big fat guy, who would slobber all over himself and he would walk up and down the mall, but would usually hang out in front of the Starbucks. And he would wear like a football jersey, and it looked like he hadn't changed his clothes in like, a month, or taken a shower. And so there were these disturbed looking people that I never really thought much of, but I just saw them there at least as often as I was there, which was a lot. And so, anyway, back over 10 years ago, one of my hobbies was exploring psychedelics, like magic mushrooms. And I would sometimes eat the mushrooms and go out in public because I found what it did for me was it helped me connect with people a lot easier in where you sometimes in the normal state it sometimes like feels not appropriate to connect with certain people or approach certain people, but on mushrooms it was easier to to break the ice. I think it's anyway. So I had this hobby, and one time I had a kind of a bad trip, not because of what the mushrooms did, but I eat some mushrooms and I go to a coffee shop, and in the coffee shop is one of these disturbed looking people. It was the badass Hells Angels looking guy, and he gives me this stare. And I guess if anyone's observant, you could tell I'd be a little bit different if I'm tripping. It was a stare that was like it was a feeling like this guy is not some bum on the street. He has some kind of purpose or even a mission. And the next day, I was doing a show on the mall, and the guy starts hanging around me and would sit in my front row, and basically he would do that whenever I did a show. And basically he was stalking me. and he would stalk me constantly on the mall, and and pretty soon other people would stalk me. The guy who was the short guy who was a combination of an alcoholic and a mental hospital patient, he would stalk me around my apartment. The big fat guy who wore the football jersey would stalk me whenever I was walking to my yoga class. And then there was another guy who would stalk me when I would go around town, places where I would meet up with people. And I figured that, they were probably connected with law enforcement, and it was because of I was tripping in public, and they had some assignment to make sure I don't do that again, or don't make a habit of it. And and I figured the problem would stop if I just stopped doing that. And so anyway, but months went by, and they kept stalking me. It was like I was being stalked 24/7. And pretty soon other stalkers would have other assignments to do. Like one guy would always pass me on the street and get angry at me. And it was like, even though I stopped tripping in public, the problem got worse. And so anyway, I decided to call a private investigator to see if I can get information about what's behind all this, who these people are. I wondered, did I piss somebody off? Did I have someone angry at me? Did I have an organization angry at me? Or, I didn't know. And so I called this private investigator, and she tells me she'll get on the case. And, I told her that I think that there are these people that hang out, that the police have some program where people act like street people, but they really work for law enforcement. And she agreed that she knew about a program like that. And later I found out there's actually a word for it called proactive policing. So anyway, she tells me she's going to call me back. And she doesn't call me back. And 3 days later I call her, and then she tells me that she can't take my case because the federal government has ways of protecting their own people. And so I felt pretty helpless. It's like, but I'll tell you what was just as bad, what was worse than all the stuff I just told you. What was worse was that whenever I would tell people, friends or people I knew, about my situation, people would dismiss me and tell me I'm imagining things or that I'm crazy. And so I had no connection to anyone that understood what I was going through, and they just dismissed me. And so I was in a lot of despair. And the situation is something that a lot of people can relate to in this quarantine. Like, for example, it's not just, it's bad enough being quarantined, and the stuff with wearing masks and social distancing and not being able to work. And I mean, it's bad enough, but when a lot of people are skeptical of the media, and they think, I think this virus might be a hoax, or if it's anything real, it's not worse than the flu. If you tell them that, they think you're crazy because they take what the media says as gospel. And who are you to say what you think the virus is when these people are supposedly experts who, and who wear suits and ties and have initials next to their name and are distinguished people, and or if you question the George Floyd incident, if you analyze the video, not just look at it, but really look at these videos where they really analyze it, and then look into the backgrounds of the people involved, you might come to a conclusion that the whole thing was staged. But when you tell people, they'll just tell you you're crazy. So I know it's a lot that people can relate to. So anyway, I was in a lot of, I felt really hopeless. I felt helpless. It was a hopeless situation. And, so what I did was I tried to get on the side of the people who were stalking me, like thinking to myself, maybe they're right. Maybe I did something really horrible by tripping in public. I didn't just trip in public. I even wrote a book back then about experiences with psychedelics, and like I thought, oh, here I am messing everything up. They have such a great system that's very wise, and it protects people and from people like me who who introduce people to these dangerous substances, and so I was there. It's like there's this thing called Stockholm syndrome, the thing where you fall in love with your abuser, and it was sort of like I tried to be on. It's like the kind of thing where you try to be on the side of the abuser as a psychological trick to be like, maybe they can't hurt me if I'm on their side, like making friends with the school bully or something. But anyway, this was, what was also frustrating about this problem was it's like a school bully. It's like there's something you could do about it. You could work out and take martial arts, But this, sort of like the quarantine, it's like I don't know what the hell to do. I don't know what to do. But anyway, so back in 2017, I saw a video on YouTube called "What to Do If You're a Targeted Individual." It was some channel called Shenji Solar, something like that. And the guy was describing exactly what was happening to me. He was being stalked by multiple people. He tells people about it and they don't believe him. And then I saw other videos of people reporting the same thing. Pretty soon I had seen hundreds of videos from people all over the world complaining about the exact thing that I was going through. And so I find out that this activity of stalking is called gang stalking or organized stalking, and that the individual that is a victim of it is called a targeted individual. And I look at lots of channels. There's a lot of good information. There's a lot of disinformation about it, and the reason for it, or one of the reasons for it that made sense to me, was that the military wants to keep order, and a big threat to order in society isn't psychopaths, but intelligent, independent thinking people who have an influence on their community. And it's a program where they neutralize these people by taking away their connections so that they're not less effective. And so, and there are probably other reasons for it besides that. There were other reasons also that made sense. So anyway, what happened when I was, learning about this through YouTube and joining these Facebook groups of victims of this situation, and there are Facebook groups with thousands of people, and you could check it out. You could, and judge for yourself whether you think these people are crazy. And so what happened was I felt less alone. I felt like, there were other people going through what I was going through, some people going through things that are worse. And when I heard the stories about things people said, I mean, people who were targeted individuals, a lot of them had committed suicide. A lot of them had stories where they would go to get mental help, to go to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist either puts them on medication or, even worse, locks them up in a mental hospital, or people who decide to attack the gang stalkers and ended up in jail. I mean, I feel like me just getting isolated isn't as bad as what happened to a lot of other people. And so I felt a lot better in that, I survived the whole, the situation, and and didn't get institutionalized. And I also, I didn't have that feeling like I ever did something wrong, or that there was something wrong with me. And and again, the feeling of not being alone. And what I think about this lockdown situation, I think a lot of people really feel like they're alone. And I think that, and one thing I'm doing by sharing my story is I want to encourage other people to share their story. And you might be surprised that there could be people who listen, and you might not be alone. You feel as alone as you do now. And anyway, so for all I know, an entire community can be built around telling their story about whatever it is they're going through. And so anyway, so so that's my story, and I encourage you to speak up. I think if more people spoke up and communicated with each other, and not, it would take less attention away from the media, and it would help people feel more connected. And anyway, thank you so much for listening. I think that listening is a very important thing right now. And I think it's what's missing in a lot of communities. What you find with this situation is, how people are not on the same wavelength as you are, if you're thinking. And so anyway, I will talk to you soon, and that's all I have to say right now.